Good evening to you from Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Regan Devines. A look at this evening's headlines. The Venezuelan and Colombian presidents talk about border crimes. An update on the long-anticipated meeting just ahead. Before flying off to the U.S., Pope Francis blesses the Catholic city in Cuba where Fidel Castro grew up. And sending the army, Hungary's parliament votes new powers to the military to use force to stop refugees entering Europe. We've got the full story for you and more now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us. We begin in Ecuador, where for the last 5 hours, the presidents of Venezuela and Colombia have been meeting to discuss the crisis on the border between their two countries. After a month of tension and harsh exchanges between Bogotá and Caracas, the leaders of Ecuador and Uruguay brokered this meeting in their roles as the current presidents of the two regional blocs, SELAC and UNASUR. An earlier attempt by Colombia to have the issue discussed by the Organization of American States had failed to gain enough support. President Maduro was the first to arrive in Quito. Venezuela has been pushing for several weeks for a bilateral meeting to address the problems on the border. Last month, Maduro's government closed some border crossings and began a large-scale operation to put a stop to the smuggling of subsidized fuel, food and medicine out of Venezuela into Colombia. The move has saved Venezuela millions of dollars in lost goods and has been largely welcomed at home.
I am going to propose to President Santos an agreement, a pact of coexistence, respect, equality and peace between Colombia and Venezuela. I am bringing a series of proposals which I hope will be received in the best way possible. And after a fruitful, respectful and friendly dialogue, we will have good news for our people.
Before leaving Bogotá, the Colombian leader said he would be looking for respect for Colombian citizens on both sides of the border. However, he acknowledged that the responsibility for finding solutions to the situation on the border lay with both governments.
Mi prioridad, entonces, en esta reunión es ante todo el respeto.
My priority in this meeting is above all respect. Respect for Colombia and its people, respect for our sovereignty and the fundamental rights of our citizens. The problems on the Venezuelan-Colombian border of drug trafficking, smuggling, criminal gangs belong to both countries and require joint solutions and joint action by both countries. Colombia is not responsible for the problems in Venezuela, but we all know we have problems along the border.
Una acción decidida de ambas naciones, cooperando. Colombia no es la culpable de los problemas de Venezuela, los problemas de la frontera. Todos sabemos que los tenemos.
We go on to Ecuador, where Telesur's Liz Schiffers is outside the Carondelet Presidential Palace in Quito, and she joins us now. Liz, are you there?
Hello, Regan. Yes, I am here.
And Liz, you've been there all day. We're expecting the two presidents to come out and talk to the press an hour ago, but it seems as though they're now beginning their media conference. Can you give us an update on what's happening there right now?
Yes, Regan. Well, the press has just entered here in the yellow room of the Carondelet Presidential Palace. We are waiting for declarations from President Santos and President Maduro. President Sabaré Vázquez and President Correa are expected to be here, as well as pro tempore presidents of the SELAC and UNASUR bodies who were mediating this dialogue today. Now, presidents entered their closed-door meeting around 2:30 this afternoon, and the meeting has just finished.
Can you just recap for us, for those of us looking who don't know, why are these two presidents meeting? How did the meeting come about? Liz? Liz, are you there? All right, we just lost Liz. We'll try to get her again later on in the newscast. We continue now. The other big news of the day is unfolding in Cuba, where Pope Francis is on the second full day of his visit. He's now in the second city of Santiago in the east of the island, where he's meeting local bishops. Earlier, he blessed the southeastern city of Holguin, backed by a chorus of Cuban children. Holguin is regarded as one of the oldest centers of Catholicism in Cuba. It is also where the brothers Fidel and Raul Castro were born. Earlier in the day, the Pope held the second big mass of his Cuban visit in the Revolution Square in Holguin. He once again called on the faithful to pay special attention to those excluded, to the old, the sick and the poor. This first Latin American Pope is highly regarded in Cuba, in part because he played a key role in reopening talks with the United States. Francis will travel on to Washington on Tuesday. We now go to Peru, where protests against extractive industries continue, now with more actions being by indigenous people in the Amazon rainforest. Our correspondent in Lima has more.
Indigenous groups continue to force a production stoppage in the oil field known as Lot 192. The action was launched in response to the government's decision to cut off dialogue with indigenous groups over crude extraction in the area. The field, which produces 10,000 barrels a day, has been out of production since the beginning of the action 9 days ago.
The indigenous leaders disagreed with the position of the state. They've said, "We are not going to stay here because we cannot do anything. We came to insist on dialogue because that is our principle, but they have closed the door, saying no more. Therefore, we don't have anything else to do here." Then the Apos returned to their villages. They informed their communities, and there they have decided to begin this indefinite action.
Quechua and Ashuar communities who live in the area and have paralyzed the crude production are demanding land titles for their communities and economic and development benefits from the oil activities. They want the country to begin to repair the immense damage done by oil contamination in the region and improve the health of the residents.
According to Pinto, the current government has the power to demand the companies pay for the damage they caused. Occidental Petroleum caused most of the environmental damage, but significant harm was also done by its successor, Plus Petrol, and the state oil company.
According to Pinto, the current government has the power to demand the companies pay for the damage they caused. Occidental Petroleum did most of the environmental damage, but significant harm was also caused by its successor Plus Petrol and the state oil company. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
The meteorological phenomenon El Niño is likely to have a big impact this year on the agriculture and fisheries of Ecuador. The United Nations has called on countries in the Pacific region to prepare for possible emergencies. It says El Niño could affect more than 4 million people. Ecuador suffered severely in 1982 and again in 1983 when El Niño brought an annual rainfall of 4,000 millimeters, flooding many areas across the country.
This year we have observed anomalous variations of ocean surface temperature. If El Niño happens, agriculture would be the first to suffer. Rice paddies at the coastal area will be inundated by torrential downpours. Animal husbandry and sugarcane planting will also be affected. We could foresee that farmers are going to lose jobs because their lands will be flooded.
The Supreme Court of the Argentinian province of Tucumán has revoked last week's decision by a lower court to annul the regional elections there. The August 23rd elections were annulled last Thursday after complaints of irregularities by oppositor José Cano of the Bicentennial Agreement Party and after weeks of violent protests. The decision by the top court was taken unanimously on Sunday night, and it validates the Front for Victory candidate Juan Manzur. Manzur had won by 12 points. The government of Tucumán had considered that the annulment attacked the democratic system and described it as a judicial coup. And now we go live to Quito, Ecuador, where we are still awaiting the outcome of a press conference by the presidents Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela and Juan Manuel Santos of Colombia. Of course, this was a meeting mediated by CELAC and UNASUR, of course, and this is based on the issue at the border where a lot has been taken out of Venezuela by Colombian paramilitaries in terms of gasoline, medical supplies, as well as food. where Colombian paramilitaries were making thousands in profits over subsidized goods from Venezuela. We were trying to get back onto Liz Schaefer's in Quito, Ecuador for an update on this meeting. However, we got cut off. We'll try to get her back again a bit later on. Moving on, a series of robberies took place over the weekend on Rio de Janeiro's beaches. The incidents heightened concerns about the city's security less than a year before the Olympic Games. Groups of teenagers snatched mobile phones and wallets, bags and jewelry from locals and tourists and ran away through the busy crowds. Just 2 weeks ago, Rio's military police were banned from detaining minors as a preventative measure, as they had done in the past. Several people, including one policeman, were hurt during the attacks. The authorities in Bolivia are trying to reduce the number of pregnancies among teenagers. Dimitri O'Donnell explains.
Trying to tackle underage pregnancies in Bolivia. At a special meeting in La Paz, health professionals and politicians joined forces to launch a plan to stop teenage girls falling pregnant at a young age.
Every year, 900,000 teenagers fall pregnant, and this is something that worries us greatly. We believe it's really important to create comprehensive policies to address this.
Every day in Bolivia, 246 babies are born to women under the age of 20, one of the highest rates in South America.
Every hour in Bolivia, 3 teenagers fall pregnant, and out of every 10 teenagers, 7 are pregnant. In total, 70% of pregnancies are unplanned.
A UN study says the rate of teenage pregnancies in Bolivia rose from 18% to 25% between 2010 and 2011, and this has a big effect on the mother.
These young teens often have no work, not many job offers, and this is how their children often come into the world. Apart from that, psychologically, they are under pressure and don't feel supported by their family.
Many teens do not have the opportunity to work in fair conditions. They have a child, and it doesn't help that their parents see them as little children.
As part of the new national plan on teenage pregnancies, young people will have greater access to sexual health information in clinics and at school. Public health centres will also help young mothers more by giving them access to services and support online as well as in the community. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
Still to come after the break, the outgoing Prime Minister is now the incoming Prime Minister. Alexis Tsipras is back in office with a clear mandate to implement Greece's new bailout. That and more next.
Facts that have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Discover Latin America and the world in our programs. Telesur Reports, The Real USA, the stories behind the tweets, Ataman, Lives, Know Your Body, Open Files, exposing the conflicts that affect our people, compelling personal stories, and the most controversial events. See it all on telesurtv.net in English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today with Bill Fletcher. The Global African, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
The leader of Syriza, Alexis Tsipras, has been sworn in as Prime Minister of Greece for the second time this year. Tsipras took the oath from the president less than a day after winning a clear victory in Sunday's snap elections. Syriza won 145 of 300 seats in parliament. He's expected to form his new cabinet by Wednesday, probably in the same coalition as before with the right-wing nationalists of the Anel party. The government's first task will be to implement the reforms agreed with Greece's creditors and to address the refugee crisis. Earlier, the EU congratulated Tsipras on his victory. However, in the same breath, the European Commission reminded the 41-year-old leader that there is no time to waste, a reference to the implementation of the reforms under the bailout agreement.
Having signed the agreement for this only last month, the new government will now have the mandate to carry out these reforms. As in the past, the Commission and President Juncker stand ready to help. There is a lot of work ahead and no time to lose.
Hungary's parliament has approved a law that allows the use of the army to handle the refugees at the border. According to this controversial new law, the army will be able to use rubber bullets, tear gas, grenades and net guns in its attempt to stop the refugees from entering the country. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán said Europe has been overrun by refugees and claimed that the police are not able to secure Hungary's borders without help from the army. Opposition parties have criticized the law.
We can defend the Serbian border stretch, and we can defend the Croatian stretch. But to do that, we need the army to patrol together with the police. If we can get the authorization to use the military too, then we can also defend the Croatian and Slovenian borders.
This proposal is unsuitable because it is against the Constitution and because it does not make clear legal situation for the soldiers, and it is all the more dangerous that soldiers and policemen will do their work in legal uncertainty, so no honest MP can support it.
The Helsinki Committee, a rights group in Budapest, has also stated its opposition to the law, which they consider an unnecessary act that's likely to increase tensions.
Hungary is not in war. Hungary is not at war with refugees. There is no armed conflict, neither at the Hungarian border nor in country. But nevertheless, the army will have the powers to prevent the escalation of, for example, riots at the border by using firearms, and will also be allowed to cause bodily injuries that are not fatal.
And Budapest is also building a new fence along its border with non-Schengen Croatia as the latter continues redirecting refugees to Hungary. The barbed wire fence is similar to the one already built on Hungary's border with Serbia. And we're back now on the line with Liz Schaefers, who is live in Quito, Ecuador. Liz, are you there? Hello, Liz. Liz? We really apologize. We're having some technical difficulties this evening. We will try again to get Liz a bit later on before the newscast is done. Continuing now to Gaza, where a fuel shortage has led to residents using alternatives to run their vehicles. Noor Harazin is there in Gaza, and she filed this report.
The destruction of the tunnels extending along Gaza's border with Egypt since June 2013 and the repeated closure of the Israeli crossings due to the Jewish holidays have triggered a severe fuel shortage in the coastal enclave. As a result, the delivery of the essential service that basically depend on the operation of backup generators during electricity outages, including water, sewage, transportation and more, has been seriously disrupted over the past weeks. Fuel shortage is nothing new in Gaza. However, necessity is the mother of invention, and as transportation is the hardest hit in such a high populated area, Gazans are forced to find solutions to survive.
أثر علي في كل شيء ممكن تتخيلوا زي ما سبق وحكيت لك أنا طالب جامعة خريج جامعة صار لي 7 سنوات.
I was largely affected by this crisis. Like I told you before, I'm a university graduate. I graduated 7 years ago. I do not have a job. I thank God and said it's no big deal. I thought about working as a taxi driver. Diesel is basic for my car to move. Cutting it means stopping my life. Second, I have a question. Who is responsible about this crisis and why? I believe these are fabricated crises. We go to the petrol station and they tell us there is no fuel. Why do I have to wait for 4 or 5 hours and not even be sure if I can fill my car's tank? I want to understand who will take responsibility for keeping me 4 or 5 hours without work.
وقومة غزة برضه مش سالين، بدوروا على ضرائب وبدوروا على مخالفات مرورية وبدوروا على تأمينه وعلى ترخيصه وعلى كل شيء، لكن عند الوقود بقول لك أزمة. الأزمات هذه مفتعلة، سياسة تجهيل.
A scene that could not be seen elsewhere except in Gaza. Drivers found no other way but to put replacing fuel for cooking gas and oil, turning a blind eye to the bad smell, the fumes and the pollution that results. Meanwhile, the United Nations has spelled out in more than a statement its concerns over the ongoing fuel shortage in the coastal enclave, as well as the impacts of using dangerous cooking oil and cooking gas to overcome their trouble. Nuharazin, Trisu TV, Gaza.
The US-led coalition struck Islamic State targets in Mosul on Sunday. A video released by the Combined Joint Task Force showed destroyed buildings and large clouds of smoke. Several airstrikes were carried out during the week in Iraq and Syria. And we're going to try one more time with Liz Schaefer. Liz, are you there?
Hello again. Yes, I am here in the Consulate Presidential Palace. Hello. Yes.
Has there been any updates? Anything you can update on in the past 15 minutes or so?
Well, Bacon, we are now here in the press conference. The presidents have arrived to the Yellow Room at the Consulate Presidential Palace, and President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, is currently speaking about this meeting to the press. Now, opening this press conference was President of Uruguay, Sabre Vasquez, who said that this is an important meeting, not only for Colombia and Venezuela, but for the region as a whole. Sabre Vasquez is the president pro-tempore of the UNASUR body, and following him was President of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, who's the pro-tempore president of the CELAC body. CELAC and UNASUR were both mediating these talks today. Correa expressed gratitude towards Maduro and Santos to put their own interests aside and come to Quito by this invitation of CELAC and UNASUR. He said that Latin America is a great family, but that differences can arise. But he said that this was a meeting that was based on mutual respect and also respecting the sovereignty of both nations. Now, he said that he read out loud the declaration, which was drafted by President Maduro and President Santos this afternoon, where they both have committed to working together to make this a border of peace. Now, one theme of this declaration is the need for cooperation of both nations to tackle these problems on the border. And President Correa said that this is part of the dream of integration of Simón Bolívar. Both President Santos and President Maduro have committed to keep working together to create conditions for peace on the border. And now in the press conference, President Maduro is currently speaking. He says that this was a respectful dialogue today, and it was a frank conversation. He said that dialogue and peace have won and come out on top in these dialogues. And he also recognized these are sensitive and complex issues that were discussed in the meeting, but that in this meeting it was shown that it is possible to have respectful dialogue on these complex and sensitive issues here again.
Thank you so much, Liz. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Hopefully we'll touch base with you tomorrow. Moving on now. Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General Faris Alwi has approved the extradition proceedings against former Vice President Jack Warner, who is wanted by the United States on corruption charges. Warner, who was vehemently denied accepting millions of dollars in bribes, is challenging the decision through his army of attorneys. They argue that Warner should be discharged as the Attorney General missed the September 16th deadline for signing off on the extradition documents. And finally this evening, he tried and failed but never stopped attempting his new feat. The new stunt by trial bike world champion Kenny Belay entailed riding across just over 120 yards on a slack line some 2,700 meters high in the French Alps. It's an inconceivable task for many, but not for the daredevil who was secured by a rope whenever he fell. Belay has been riding for 22 years and has amassed 9 world championship titles for trial riding, which is an extreme test of bike handling skills that often includes natural and man-made obstacles. Before we go an update on that top story, the presidents of Venezuela and Colombia have agreed to a package of several measures to confront the situation on the border between their two countries. After almost 5 hours of talks in Quito, Ecuador, they have agreed to return their respective ambassadors to Caracas and Bogota. They will now continue the dialogue brokered by Ecuador and Uruguay. Much more on our website right after this. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Like I said, from our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.